Call the Honourable the Minister for Social Services.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the Leader for the Opposition for bringing this matter forward for this debate today. Domestic violence, Madam Speaker, is an issue that transcends this place and its politics. We are a great country, but there is a dark corner, and this is that dark corner that we speak about today. And by having this debate today, but more importantly, the many things that are being done, have been done and must continue to be done, will shed a light and expose this dark place of our great nation. It is my hope that all Australians, Madam Speaker, and the hope of the Abbott government, collectively and individually join together in our efforts to reduce and ultimately, as the Leader of Opposition has just said, eliminate violence against women. I acknowledge the contribution of all members of this place, past and present, and look forward to the contribution of those future who have worked so hard on this goal. And I in particular acknowledge you, Madam Speaker, for your work in this area over a long period of time, and where you have had a very simple message that women must be respected. And throughout your career, you have lived that, and you have brought great respect to women in this country. And I think that is ultimately what, if we share that as a country, then that goes a long way to addressing the issues that are here. We live in a country, as we've reminded ourselves today, which assault and violence are illegal, yet 1 in 3 women in Australia will experience domestic violence, 1 in 5 sexual violence, and 1 a week murdered at the hands of a former or current partner. That is not the Australia I want my daughters to grow up in. That is not the country I see for them. That is something that I think brings us all together in this place to try and work to avoid for their future. And it saddens us and sickens us that that has been the experience of so many Australian women, our sisters. I see, as ministers who have served in the portfolio I serve in today, and they sit across the chamber, both the causes and consequences of this every single day. And you get a rare insight in this role to see it at such a pervasive level across the community. And that only stirs us up, I think, Madam Speaker, to address the matters that are before us. Violence against women is exactly that. It is violence and it is a crime, and it is completely unacceptable. The government recognises that domestic violence needs to be a national priority. The Prime Minister has elevated it as an issue at every Commonwealth and state and territory level through the Council of Australian Government's agenda. The federal government will be seeking agreement of all states and territories to the priorities through the implementation of the National Domestic Violence Order Scheme, so that a protection order issued in one state applies in all states. These are practical measures, Madam Speaker. I think the sentiment that has been expressed here today is important, but I think we all acknowledge that that sentiment must be translated into actual things that happen on the ground that provide the protections and deliver the changes that are necessary. So the implementation of a National Domestic Violence Order Scheme is an important reform and an important change. In addition, COAG will work to develop a set of national standards for how we intervene against perpetrators and hold them accountable, and to consider the enactment of a national approach to dealing with technology misuse and online safety so we can protect women against newer forms of abuse. And this even goes into the area of bullying, Madam Speaker. I mean, all of us who are parents of young daughters just live in fear, frankly, of what they can be exposed to in the online space. And not just young girls, but women of all ages. And this is something we must be across. The Prime Minister's announcement bolsters the work of the Australian Government that we are doing with state and territory governments and non-government organisations, and the Leader of the Opposition has acknowledged their important role, as he should, as we should, through the National Plan to Reduce Violence Against Women and Their Children from 2010 to 2022. The Prime Minister has appointed an expert panel on preventing violence against women, which rightly has its foundation members, our Australian of the Year, Rosie Batty, and of course Ken Lay, the former Commissioner of the Victorian Police. In July last year, the government launched the National Second Action Plan for violence against women, and it allocated more than $100 million over 4 years to support its delivery. I was there on that day, Madam Speaker, and it was quite a sight to see the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women, Senator Cash, standing there but with every state and territory police commissioner in the country. The opposition leader was there, the deputy opposition leader there, were many members from the government who were there. And to see that statement of solidarity amongst our most senior law enforcement officers in the country, standing there resolute, making it a priority for every single one of their police forces, was a great thing to see, but it wasn't surprising. It really wasn't surprising because they see it every day. I'm the son of a policeman, Madam Speaker, and I know a bit about what police go through every day and the trials that they deal with and what they see every day in this dark corner of our country. And it affects them. It affects them deeply and terribly. So I wasn't surprised to see them standing there, shoulder to shoulder, with the Parliament, with the government, saying, we will get this done. Under that second action plan, Madam Speaker, the Australian government is providing over $100 million, as I said, and it includes initiatives such as $3.3 million for Crimtrack to develop and test a prototype for a national domestic violence order scheme, $1.7 million to take the next steps in developing a national data collection and reporting framework, including $300,000 for the Australian Bureau of Statistics to augment data sets on victims and offenders. This is important data for planning and aligning your resources to ensure that you can tackle this problem and deploy people where you need to and schemes where you need to. More than $1 million to expand the 1-800-RESPECT line, Australia's first national professional telephone and online counselling service. $3.5 million for projects under the Australian National Research Organisation, 20 separate projects, I understand, for women's safety. Under the 2014-16 research program, and $1 million investment to establish a sports grants bank from which national sporting codes can fund violence prevention activities. The government has also delivered on its commitment of $1 million to White Ribbon Australia to expand their campaign to culturally and linguistically diverse and Indigenous communities. As a former Minister for Immigration, and as others opposite will know, ensuring that you take the message from the mainstreamed community into these quite discrete communities and ensure that they can address the very specific challenges in those communities, particularly for quite recently arrived migrants who come from quite different cultural settings to what we have here in this country, and helping both the women understand their rights and the country in which they now live, and helping the men understand the country in which they now live. And so making sure that we roll this out across the very many different linguistically and culturally diverse communities we have in Australia is important. White Ribbon Australia is working to develop a culture of gender equality, which the Leader of the Opposition has also mentioned, and of respect, where attitudes and behaviours that support the use of violence are no longer tolerated. The White Ribbon campaign aims to end violence against women by encouraging men and boys to take positive action to create change. We've also provided as a government $6 million towards the Northern Territory's $18 million domestic and family violence reduction strategy from 2014 to 2017, which is known as Safety is Everyone's Right. Everyone's right. In addition, today Minister Cash, the Minister assisting the Prime Minister for Women, announced that the federal government will work with state and territory governments to deliver a $30 million jointly funded national awareness raising campaign. And I pay tribute to Minister Cash for her work in this area. And while the federal government's commitment to domestic violence is resolute, the issue of inconsistent and inadequate sentencing and justice administration responses for domestic violence perpetrators must be addressed. It must be addressed, Madam Speaker. The matters that have been raised today in this debate, and will continue with the other speakers, I think will enjoy much agreement around this chamber. And it is important that we have occasions like this to try and stir on the action that I said has been there, is there now, and must continue. It must continue, but we also need to take account and stock, I think, of the gains that are being made. They need to continue to be made. Those contributions, including your own and the many others of this place, Madam Speaker, need to be acknowledged and they need to be built on, because the same thing that motivated the people who came before us in this place and acted on these issues as well as they could in their times we must also do the same. The government has this as a national priority, Madam Speaker. We are demonstrating that through the activities that we're already engaged in. The Leader of the Opposition has put forward proposals today, and the Prime Minister has agreed to discuss those with the Leader of the Opposition. This is a very worthy initiative, and I commend this debate for the House, Madam Speaker.